you're gonna feel down and you're gonna have anxiety and you're gonna feel depressed, and you're not gonna know why a lot of the time. So we start panicking and start grabbing onto things, like trying to figure out why we're down, why we're depressed. And then we might start looking at like everything that happened in our life and start, blaming events or blaming people as to why we feel like that. But, in all honesty, it's us who's feeling like that. It's our responsibility. Like, once you notice it, how your body is and where you are in your consciousness cycle, then you can be more in flow. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to be going through trauma and mental health challenges and feeling so disconnected and lost and isolated without having a knowing at the experience level, a knowing that God is love, that God is always with you, and that love is always there, and that. Hey family, welcome to our cosmic channel with me, Cate Slade, where we discuss galactic knowledge and wisdom from within. Today I want to talk about embracing transition and why this is really important, not only for our mental health, but also our transition as a species, but mostly, our mental health and our own well-being. It's something that I'm super passionate about. This is just a really beautiful piece on embracing transition, what that really means, how we can do that. So the importance of embracing transition is kind of obvious when we're thinking about change, as change is, really the only constant in physical reality. And if we don't embrace the truth of that, then that type of resistance is what causes a lot of suffering. And specifically what that means, when we're talking about consciously walking a spiritual path, is that when we're talking about cycles and when we think about cycles, it's really useful to connect with and think about the seasons on Earth. And, there are seasons and cycles that happen within Mother Earth on Gaia. And in the same way, we can also have seasons and cycles of consciousness, and this is part of consciousness expanding and consciousness evolution and building a new paradigm on that. So there are times of great fruitfulness, where our life seems rich with ideas and enthusiasm and creativity, summer, spring, we can just feel really up, sometimes, and just feel really happy for no real reason, like everything's just going well, we're in flow. But there are also cycles which are like winter, when we just feel for some reason like we really need to nestle inwards and pull away. And that's why this sort of dialogue is really helpful to know about, because we're all going to feel that way. We're all going to feel like we're having our periods of winter when we just don't have the energy and we need to, we shut down a little bit. And that is a natural cycle within our consciousness. It's not unnatural to be like that. And I guess that's just a really important element, and something that we should think about is that, these cycles with, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then we kind of transfer that and overlay that parallel to our own cycles of consciousness, where sometimes we're in flow and sometimes we're not. Winter can look really daunting and really worrying. Everything's, dying, trees are losing their leaves, there's no flowers. And I always think about, maybe my life and past lives when we lived in tribes, and, we would be, for hundreds and thousands of years where we were not so advanced, and when we were really just early evolution. Definitely thunder and lightning and storms, that would have been really scary for early humans who didn't understand cycles, and who didn't understand the interconnectedness of nature. So yeah, that's just a little rant about the seasons and why it's important to think about our winters of consciousness and how they are completely natural. So they are completely natural cycles, and it is important for us to honor them, because the cycles ultimately, they can't be controlled. And in this very, very busy reality, we think that we can control it. So if we feel like we're having a cycle, a consciousness cycle where we're moving inwards for whatever reason, whatever that might be, like a winter cycle, then instead of forcing ourselves to be active in the physical world by busying ourselves with tasks and distractions, we're repeatedly ignoring these signals to pay attention to the natural cycles. Basically repeatedly ignoring these cycles and repeatedly ignoring the signals in which to pay attention to these natural cycles reinforces, like habitually, an inability to feel it at all. Like just this numbing, like a psychic numbing of depressing emotions which feel, just very inward and nestled, and just not a lot of energy, sometimes. And that's why boundaries are so important, because so many people out there just want to constantly be distracted all the time by going out and partying and all these types of things that keep us distracted and that keep us numbed, is because we're running away from the hard, the cold, hard truth of life. And winter represents the things we don't want to look at, these ideas about death and these ideas about dying. That's the winter in us, these ideas that we just cannot look at the moment. And it doesn't always have to be that deep, but when we're having these winter cycles of consciousness where we just feel down and we just need to go inwards, for whatever reason, sometimes we don't know what the reason is, and it's hard to know what the reason is when you're just constantly distracting yourself, making plans all the time, doing this and this and that. It's actually not helpful. We need to feel that and pay attention to that part of us. So what happens, when that happens, we feel out of balance and we feel disconnected and we don't know how to reconnect. And that's when life starts getting really chaotic and confusing, and when we just can't understand what's going on and why. So the idea of embracing transition is suggesting that we have a two-part process to navigating these cycles, which I want to talk about. So firstly, we learn to regularly and consistently connect with our inner self and really feel where we are in our consciousness cycle. So that's really just about honoring and knowing what's going on with you, And if you're feeling down, if you're feeling really down, don't worry about it. Just accept it and feel it, because there's so much. I recently wrote an essay about intergenerational trauma, and the neurology behind that. There's the childhood brain development behind this transgenerational trauma. Is that we've all we're all affected by the trauma that affected our parents and our grandparents. You know, there've been so many world wars that are, you know, terrible things that have happened that of course is gonna affect us. And the interesting thing is that when this directly affected our, you know, great grandparents, great grandparents, that numbing, that tuning out, that psychic numbing, that pushing, depressing of the emotions would have caused, you know, because they weren't able to cope with the pain of the trauma that was going on. So they had to just tune out, you know, that's the only way that they could cope with the pain was by tuning out and not feeling it. So they, you know, this sort of learned behavior would have been passed on to the children who had these really, really emotionally distant parents who were not present for them. And then that also, you know, because they don't know any better, and then that also gets passed down, but it happens in the womb. So that will all happen in the womb, and then we get triggered in early life by, you know, any type of like adversity or, you know, any type of hurt or pain. Then that severe trauma then gets triggered just through the memory of it happening epigenetically. So basically what I'm saying is with that is that you're gonna feel down and you're gonna have anxiety and you're gonna feel depressed and you're not gonna know why a lot of the time. So we start panicking and start grabbing onto things, like trying to figure out why we're down, why we're depressed. And then we might start looking at like everything that happened in our life and start, you know, blaming events or blaming people as to why we feel like that. But, you know, in all honesty, it's us who's feeling like that. It's our responsibility, and it's our responsibility to recognize that that's just how we're feeling in that moment because of whatever reason. And it's so complicated and it spans, you know, so many eons of generations that's been happening to us, that it's so complicated and it's so complex that it's okay not to know why that's happening. Just sort of to just be safe in the knowledge that has happened, that is happening. We don't have to always understand it because we can't control it. So when we connect at that level with our inner self, just surrendering to it and knowing, you know, that is happening to us, connecting with ourselves internally just by allowing it and really feeling where we are in our consciousness cycle, just picking up on it, you know, just paying attention to it. And then secondly, once we've learned to recognize what's happening in these inner cycles, then we can learn when we have a fruitful time, you know, when we have our spring, when we have our summer. And then we can also learn when we need time for stillness. Because otherwise, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to really feel, I'm starting to really understand like my body telling me stuff. And just feeling certain ways, like sometimes I'll just feel so out of it, sometimes I'll feel really focused, you know, like sometimes I can physically feel when my consciousness is trapped in a past trauma or trapped in a past event, because I'm just not there. I'm just not in the present. I'm so just trapped in that other realm, you know, that other dimension of that thing that happened to me, and it's always in the past. So it's good to know that, because then you can come back when you really start recognizing what's happening in your body and what's happening in your mind. Then you can start recognizing and seeing how it works, where you are with it. So if your energy is moving outward, then honor that and move with it. You know, go to the gym, go to parties, go out drinking, go to bars, go see your friends, you know, like, and that's when you'll be in a good place for it, and that's when you'll be present. That's the thing, is like, once you notice it, how your body is and where you are in your consciousness cycle, then you can be more in flow because you've got the energy for it, you know? You just feel like buzzing, you know, like I can do, yeah, like you just have a good time, you'll laugh more, you know, you'll be more present in that cycle that's appropriate for you. Do you see? And then the same is the opposite, you know, when you just don't feel, and that's boundaries. Boundaries are so important when you just don't feel like it, when you're just not up to it and you just can't do it. And then that's when you go in, and then that's when you meditate, and that's when you self-care, and that's when you heal. And again, in that sense, you'll also be more present in that. You know, more present in your meditation, more present in your bath times, more present in your chanting and burning incense and, you know, in dancing, you know, whatever it is, you know, dancing as prayer, whatever it is, where you need to go inwards and just be there for yourself, you'll be more in flow with it if you recognize it and honor the cycle of it. So if your energy is moving inwards, know that it's time for longer, just long periods of quiet inner work and nurturing yourself when you do that. And in these times of inner work, it becomes possible to observe the aspects of you that are in transition. So that means observing the aspects of you that are in transition is knowing the parts of your consciousness that need to die, you know, that need to change. Because that, you know, how many times have you said, you know, this isn't who I am? You know, I'm someone else. You know, your authentic self is like realizing, finding and realizing that part of your consciousness that didn't serve you. And you can only do that by actively serving yourself. So just like your skin cells continually die and renew themselves, aspects of your consciousness do the same. So this means that we have loads of opportunities for renewal all the time. However, when unhealed belief systems and unhealed pain and trauma or fears that keep you stuck, these are the things that keep you stuck, you know, the things that just keep you so indecisive, you know, just so down, just so unmotivated. Just, you know, I find myself just staring, you know, just so like I can't do anything, you know, when I'm depressed. I can't make decisions, I can't physically move, you know, I'm just stuck. It's like there's just nothing. And it's those unhealed belief systems, that unhealed pain, those fears that keep you literally stuck, mentally and physically stuck. We need to rebuild on that. We need to rebuild the new us from this old foundation. So it's just a constant finding that pain, finding that belief system, finding that fear, you know, honoring it, moving with it, healing it, loving it, letting it flow, so that we can find it, see it, honor it, love it, surrender it, let it go, and then rebuild the new us, having seen that, having known that, having, you know, at the experience level, and rebuilding the new you from the old foundation over and over again. And the result of it it's not a new you entirely, but it's a refreshed copy of the old you. So kind of like surfing and catching a wave, when you do a lot of this really deep and honest inner work, you can learn how to find these transition windows in which the slightest change can have a really big impact. So just like surfing, it isn't a mental process. It's an organic, intuitive one that, sometimes we can't understand intellectually, but we feel compelled to follow it. So that's what I was saying about, trying to figure out why we're feeling down all the time. Trying to pinpoint what it was. Oh, my mum did this, my dad did this, oh, this happened to me, I was bullied. It's not something we're ever going to be able to figure out. It's so ingrained in our genes, in our trauma memory from eons of generations, because ever since Lucifer rebellion, ever since Adam and Eve, there's so much confusion. It was never really supposed to be like this. So much drama and miscommunication, not communicating at the heart level, always trying to communicate with the head and with the mind. It can't, intellectually, we just can't, because there's no room for understanding at a heart level. It's all just semantics and symbols. Do you see? We can't really ever figure this stuff out intellectually. It's so much grander than that. And I'll talk about the Lucifer rebellion and the Galactic Prince and, what happened with Adam and Eve, because I'm reading this awesome book about it all. It's so amazing. I will talk about that in another video. It's really interesting because it helps us think about what evil really is and how it's just, not being in service to God. Anyway, another video. So anyway, just like surfing isn't a mental process, it's an organic, intuitive one. We may not understand intellectually, but we feel compelled to follow. That's when, it can be painful, because it's just in the heart. It's just the emotion of it. It's really painful. It is really painful. But it requires us to see what we don't want to see. We just inherently don't want to see stuff that's painful. So in that way, pain is a very valuable marker that shows us the possibility to embrace this transition and to heal in that window. So just don't let it pass you by. Because we do again and again and again and again. We just go on. We just get on with it. But it will keep coming up. It will keep coming up. So this inner work, this presence, this knowing, it gives us those opportunities for healing. And healing is just literally knowing that you have this capacity for love, that you can go back and you can give yourself so much love. And knowing that love is there is so important. Finding God, knowing God, having experiences at this level of knowing where God is love and you are part of that. And to have those experiences, you can't keep numbing your shit. You've got to be brave and do deep meditations. I do psychedelic work. I'm not telling anyone to do psychedelic work, but I'm saying that I've done that to facilitate healing, because I can't imagine how difficult it must be to be going through trauma and mental health challenges and feeling so disconnected and lost and isolated without having a knowing at the experience level, a knowing that God is love, that God is always with you, and that love is always there, and that love is all consuming, and that is literally you, part of you. Love is everything. So without knowing that, I can't imagine how difficult it must be to cope. The only way you would cope is just by tuning out, by numbing, by tuning out, by depressing, by just pushing it down. And I get that. I fucking get that. And that's why this healing is ongoing. That's why this healing is a journey, but not in the sense that there's a destination, because there isn't, but just in the sense that it's an adventure of experience, of knowing, of discovery, So by embracing transition, you pay attention to these cycles of consciousness, and you honor those cycles, and you do what you need to do to care for yourself. And there is innate divine intelligence within you. You know what you need to do to take care of yourself. And finally, be vigilant for the markers that precede transition. So pain, discomfort, fear, resistance. These emotions represent transition windows through which you can literally rebuild your inner foundation. So once you recognize these markers, let them guide you to catch the wave of your inner transformative energy and move with that flow. And in doing this, your transition is embraced wholeheartedly, and your new foundation is born. I hope that was helpful. Namaste. I love you very much. And please do join me again really, really soon.